The invitation to my wife Emily's company gala had been sitting on our kitchen counter for nearly 2 weeks. She never actually invited me herself. Instead, she casually mentioned that it was mostly for employees, and suggested I'd probably be bored. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. We had been married for 9 years, and she'd always wanted me by her side at company events. This time was different. That Friday evening, I put on my best suit anyway and drove to the hotel ballroom, thinking I'd surprise her. The moment I walked through the doors, the room fell strangely quiet before conversations slowly resumed. Then I saw Emily across the room laughing with a senior coworker. They were standing much closer than I expected, completely absorbed in conversation. Before I could even reach her, a small group nearby noticed me and someone sarcastically muttered, "Well, the 1-minute man finally showed up." A few people laughed. Emily looked embarrassed but didn't say a word. I stood there quietly, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew something they didn't. Within the next hour, every person in that ballroom would wish they had kept those jokes to themselves. The nickname wasn't new. I'd heard whispers before, although nobody had ever said it to my face. Office gossip has a way of turning half-truths into entertainment. Months earlier, someone had overheard part of a private conversation between Emily and one of her closest co-workers. Without understanding the context, rumors spread quickly. Before long, people who barely knew me had created an entire story about our marriage. Some assumed we were constantly arguing. Others invented details that never happened. Instead of asking questions, people chose the version that made for the funniest joke. Emily insisted she ignored the gossip because she didn't want to make it worse, but every time she stayed silent, the rumors grew louder. I told myself it didn't matter because strangers didn't define who I was. Still, standing in that ballroom while complete strangers laughed at me tested every ounce of self-control I had. I could have defended myself immediately. Instead, I waited, because I knew the truth had a way of revealing itself at exactly the right moment. As the evening continued, Emily finally walked over and quietly apologized for the awkward welcome. Before she could explain anything else, the company's CEO stepped onto the stage to begin the night's award ceremony. Everyone gathered around the tables. Conversation stopped, and the room became silent. I took a seat near the back while Emily returned to her department. My heart wasn't racing because of the jokes anymore. I was waiting for something entirely different. A few weeks earlier, the CEO had personally contacted me after learning about an important project I had completed as an independent cybersecurity consultant. Unknown to almost everyone in the room, I had spent months helping the company recover from a major security incident behind the scenes under a strict confidentiality agreement. Tonight was the first time that agreement would officially end. After recognizing several employees, the CEO paused and smiled. "Before we finish tonight," he said, "there's one person here who never asked for recognition but deserves every bit of it." My name appeared on the large screen behind him. The room instantly became silent. The same people who had laughed only minutes earlier turned toward me with confused expressions. The CEO explained how my work had helped protect the company during one of the most difficult periods in its history, and how my professionalism had prevented enormous losses. He thanked me publicly and invited me to the stage. As I walked forward, I noticed the expressions around the room changing from amusement to surprise. Nobody was laughing anymore. Standing at the podium, I thanked the CEO for his kind words and then looked across the audience. "Success isn't about proving strangers wrong," I said. "It's about staying focused on your character even when people misunderstand you." I never mentioned the jokes directly. I never embarrassed anyone. There was no need. The silence filling the ballroom said everything. Emily looked down, clearly realizing how much those rumors had affected both of us. Several employees avoided eye contact altogether. Sometimes the strongest response isn't a clever comeback. Sometimes it's allowing the truth to speak louder than gossip ever could. After the ceremony ended, a few co-workers approached me to apologize for believing stories they had never bothered to verify. I accepted their apologies politely because holding on to resentment wouldn't change the past. Emily admitted she should have confronted the rumors much earlier instead of hoping they would disappear on their own. We had an honest conversation that night about how silence can unintentionally give false assumptions room to grow. It wasn't an easy discussion, but it was one we had needed for a long time. Over the following weeks, Emily and I worked on rebuilding the openness that had slowly faded between us. We promised each other that difficult conversations would happen immediately instead of being postponed until frustration took over. I also learned an important lesson. You cannot control what people choose to believe, but you can control how you respond. Reputation built on integrity lasts much longer than gossip built on speculation. The people who mattered eventually saw the truth because it was supported by actions rather than rumors. Looking back, I barely remember the laughter that greeted me when I entered that ballroom. What I remember most is what happened afterward. The room that had echoed with jokes became completely silent once the facts replaced assumptions. That evening reminded me that respect is earned through consistency, not popularity. People will sometimes judge you before they know your story, but time has a remarkable way of revealing character. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't revenge that changed the atmosphere. It was the realization that kindness, patience, and integrity had spoken far louder than any rumor ever could.